Hey everyone, good to have you back with us again. Good to be with you. Good to have my wife Linda McDermott, Reverend Linda, here again, once again discussing some new ideas this week.
Good to be back.
Thank you. Glad to have you. And also, this is new.
Yeah,
This
new
is
decoration
New decorations.
every week. We're
That's
trying
right.
out new things.
The ukulele. We'll talk about the ukulele maybe in a minute, but the band,
Yeah.
awesome job on
Awesome.
Paul Simon's song. It's such a quirky song, but I love the sound of that and the idea, the myth of the fingerprint. I like that idea that we are more connected than disconnected. That idea of individual fingerprints making us, we're really more connected. I think that's what that song was about. But speaking of connected, did you know that cup of coffee, it took 10,000 people to get that cup of coffee from beans
No, it didn't.
to you? 10,000 people. Yep. When you think the growers and the harvesters and the shipper, the people packaging, the shipping,
Okay.
and distributing, the shelving. I mean, all together. I read this. Okay, I read
All
this
right.
somewhere. But 10,000 people to get the cup of coffee from beans to cup, and then of course from me making it.
10,001.
10,001.
Except I brought it to you, so that's 10,002. You know, that kind of reminds me of that book that we used to read to the
I
kids,
still read it.
Busy Town.
I love that book.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. It's all these little animals representing Busy Town, and everybody has a different job. There's a baker, there's the airline pilot, there's the doctors, the teachers, the sewer workers,
recyclers.
the plumbers,
Grocers, yeah.
Everybody has a job in Busy Town because that's what all of us working together. That's what makes
There's
it
all
work.
these different connections and interconnections, and you get to watch it. You
I
get
love
to see
it.
it. It's
I
like
love
looking
it.
at the innards of a body or something. You get to see it all working.
Yeah.
And it's true for us. I mean, all around us, that we are largely unaware of what it takes to make our lives work. That we just
How
take for granted.
interdependent we
If we just think
are.
of the cup of coffee, think about every little thing that we do and how many different parts went into that, how many different pieces of the puzzle went into making that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something I saw recently in a TED Talk about where iron comes from. Iron in our blood that carries the oxygen through our system. Talking about interconnectedness in a very scientific way.
So where does the iron come from?
Colliding galaxies. Silent moment, pause. I think we'll see a picture from the Hubble telescope, which is amazing what we can see.
mind-boggling
So,
stuff.
billions of years and billions of years ago, these galaxies collide. Everything rotates in the universe, and eventually these galaxies collide, and that's where they think these sources of such minerals as iron and other minerals ultimately end up in planets, and ultimately end up as elements of all living things.
And that's what carries our blood,
And
and so
that's
we're our life.
Well, we've heard that we're made of stardust. Well, literally, our life depends on a
galaxies
tiny,
colliding.
tiny molecule of iron in our hemoglobin. Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing. Well, we take it for granted, but we all know that when our air is polluted, we can't breathe.
Right.
And so one of the ways we care about each other is to take care of our environment in all kinds
Planting
of different
trees
ways.
and yeah.
Even wearing masks.
Right. The importance
has been
of wearing a
very
mask
important way of loving one
is
another.
another way of showing our interdependence and our interconnectedness.
And showing us how essential some people are that we sometimes don't even recognize, but they're now essential workers because we know we need them in a way we didn't really recognize before.
And it sort of smacks in the face of this idea of rugged individualism and independence. And that's kind of what we were wanting to talk about today, this idea of declaring our interdependence. Because yesterday was
4th of July. I hope you had a nice 4th of
That's
July.
Right, trying to find fireworks
Probably
anywhere.
very different.
But I started pondering sort of some ideas with the 4th of July and with this idea of the story that we tell ourselves. It's a part of our history, the story of our independence. And so I started thinking about freedom, which is a core concept of independence. And I looked at the etymology of the words, because I love to play with words. I love to play with words. I can't say them very well, and I don't remember, but I love to play with them. So the word freedom, if you look at the root word, you take it apart and you look at the oldest sort of etymology of it. Look at the root word of free, for example. There's a Germanic root word that is fry, right? And that means beloved.
You mean the root of fry in German? The European roots of...
No, if you go even further back, the Indo-European root, which is I might be spelling it wrong, but pri, that actual ancient Indo-European root is means to love. So if you take the two together, free has this rooted meaning of
beloved,
not independence,
right?
not individualism, but affirmation, beloved, to love.
Okay, free.
So you put dom with it, right? And the ancient roots to that mean like an affirmation or a judgment or to call out. So you are literally, when you say freedom, you are literally saying we are declaring one another as beloved, as of
Wow.
worth. Now put that in context with all the fighting we're doing over mask wearing, when we're talking about infringing on our rights, and
Yeah.
we're talking about that as being a part of our freedom. We are totally misunderstanding what freedom is about. Freedom is about love.
The declaration.
It's a declaration
that we love one another.
that we love one another. I mean,
How many people know that?
Yeah, how many people know that? Absolutely right.
The woman who was throwing a fit in the store because they were going to make her wear a mask, and she starts throwing our stuff on the floor. Do you think she knows that?
Right.
She was claiming her freedom.
That's what she thought she was doing. In fact, she even said that in there. It's my right. Didn't you see that? It's in the Constitution.
Oh.
You know? and you want to go back and look at not just what the Constitution is about. What are the words that we say about? That is where we operate more out of fear and out of just our basic brain stem, and we are not thinking about what we're doing. We're reacting.
So we need to let freedom ring. The declaration that we are beloved to one another, and that's how we're connected.
Or try to practice that next time.
That's
where we're going to go. We're going to talk about how we practice interdependence. And it's going to have something to do with saying, you're beloved.
Okay.
To the people we don't want to say it to. Anyway, read our scripture.
Okay. Scripture from Gospel of John, chapter 15, one of the I am statements of Jesus. And he says, this is a different translation. I am the vine and you are the branches. Remain in me and I will remain in you. A branch can't produce fruit by itself, but must remain in the vine. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, then you will produce much fruit. Without me, you can't do anything.
This is one of my favorite verses, in the scripture. And it's the Gospel of John, which is a mystical gospel, right? A community that's much later after Jesus' life. But what does this mean to you? Because we were talking about this yesterday.
That we have this myth that we're not rooted together, but we are. Our essence, the ground of being, is that vine. And so I was thinking about that idea of interconnectedness, and okay, this is just how my mind works. But I was taking a walk yesterday out by the lake, and I got distracted by watching this man who was pulling a big fish in from the water, and I began to think, wonder if that fish even knew he was in the water before he got pulled out of the water, because now he obviously knows he's not in the water and he's struggling. And so I thought, well, what if you said to the fish, you swim, you live and move and have your being in water.
Is this like Dr. Doolittle, you're talking to fish?
Yeah.
This is what you're doing now?
But the fish would answer and say,
the fish answered, yeah.
What are you talking about? What's
Right.
water? And I would try to explain it to him, and the fish would say, I don't believe in water. I don't even believe in water.
I like that. I mean, that is so true for us. We'll argue about what is God or what isn't God.
Do you believe in God?
Do you believe?
But the truth is, it doesn't. For that fish, it's silly, I know, but it's not whether or not the fish believes in the water. It just is, and that's kind of my affirmation of faith. That whether you say I believe in God or not, we're all rooted in the ground of our being, the ground of our being.
So we know scientifically how we are interconnected.
Sure, we know,
right?
We can prove that.
We are definitely interconnected.
Now, we may not call it God, but we are.
But we are telling
the ground of all being.
And theologically,
the
we are telling a different story because we are telling with this independence, we are telling this idea that no, we are disconnected. We are not connected to God. God is out there.
Right.
And God is utilitarian for us, like what we need God to do.
But we're the branches and we're connected to the vine. If we're not connected to the vine, we wither. Yeah. It's not like we're going to get thrown out, like we read that verse as being punishment. You're going to throw in the fire and all that. Mm-hmm. But it really just means you're going to wither.
Right.
If you lose connection with the source of all being and the connection we have with one another, you will begin to wither, as your soul will wither away.
Yep.
We were talking earlier this week about one of our favorites, who is
Victor Frankl. Well, yeah.
I think
because again, when we think about this idea of the utilitarian kind of orientation to life, it's this idea that what can life do for us, which is again sometimes how we look at God
others
too.
Do for us?
And what Victor Frankl, who suffered in, he was at Auschwitz for years. He said, "What can I expect from life has to be changed and seen from the other side." In other words, what does life expect from me?
Oh, wow.
Right? So it's a relationship. It's a relationship.
What does life expect from me?
What do you expect from me is better in our relationship than me saying what I expect you to do for me, right?
Right.
Right. and so what he's saying is not we who are permitted to ask about the meaning of life. It is life that asks the questions and directs the questions at us. We are the ones who must give the answers to the constant hourly question of our life. Our whole act of being means nothing other than responding to and being responsible with life. So it's a relationship. And
what's life asking of me?
And you've had that experience in moments. You told me a story yesterday about a hospital visit you had.
Well, actually, she was not in the hospital. She was at home. She was on hospice, and so she knew these were her final days. But she and I had been friends, and she had asked me to come by and do guided meditations with her, maybe a couple of times a week, which I did. And then after the meditation, she would reflect on them, and these beautiful reflections that were so inspiring to me. And I remember one time she said to me, "It's not that I cannot waste my time asking, why is this happening to me? I have to reframe that question to say, what is life asking of me right now?" And she was saying that in the midst of knowing her life was coming to an end. But you know what she did? Even at those times, she gave a gift of her presence to me, her wisdom, her insight. She was still living that out. Even in her final moments, she was saying, what is life asking of me right here, right now, in these situations?
It's about relationship. It's this relationship we have with life, which is, again, it's when we see things as independent and we start thinking of independence as my rights versus your rights, or how we try to have our rights, our own individual rights together, it's missing the point, and we're missing the best of what we can be when we're in relationship with one another, when we're interdependent. Martin Buber, we've talked about Martin Buber often, the Jewish theologian. And he talked about seeing people and seeing life as I thou as opposed to I it. For him, it was the sacredness of life that we all share in, and that when we do encounter one another, like your visit with her, those moments were as powerfully transformative to you as they were to her.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you were not asking what she can do for you, nor were you also entering into that with, I have no idea what I can do for her.
It was what was life asking of me.
It's what is life asking of me in this moment.
In that moment.
Yeah. And so, I remember sometimes we get so caught up in this idea that we have to do things, we have to experience things a certain way, that we miss where we are in the moment. And I think about that story of the fish story, the fish that was swimming along.
Another fish story?
Another fish story.
Okay.
And this one I've told before, but this one where the fish is suddenly swimming in the ocean and
he suffers from...
Well, he looks down and suddenly sees there's this darkness below him.
Oh, okay.
It's just it's always been there. The ocean's always dark, but suddenly he notices it.
Yeah.
And he starts to panic, and he seems to lose his ability to swim, and then he's wondering, well, how is it that I float anyway? I don't even know where I am. And so he starts sort of chasing his tail, literally kind of swimming in circles because he's not sure how to move forward. We could think.
So he's having a panic attack.
He's having a finis nervosa. and so he's having this nervous reaction when all of a sudden the ocean, which has been observing this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Starts to say, what's the problem? And fish says, I can't swim. I don't know where I am. It's a dark chasm. I'm going to fall down. I'm going to fall into this darkness. And the ocean eventually says, after some observations, well, how is it that you haven't fallen into that chasm before? And the fish stops for a second, slows down the spin, and it says, swimming?
Yeah.
And the ocean just says, yeah. And so the fish suddenly tries to move a fin, and then moves another fin, and then eventually it's moving along in a direction, and then says, by the way, what are you? And the ocean says back, it's a deep topic. You know,
it goes back to the fish, recognizing that it really is in water.
Trying to tell someone, Anthony DeMello, the monk, had said in one of his story collections, says, trying to teach somebody about where God is like trying to show a fish where the water is.
That's exactly the conversation I had with the fish at the lake.
Fish, you're swimming in it. No, so Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese Buddhist teacher and very well known, and a lot of us
very
like
wise.
Stuff. He had this one thing called Interbeing that really fits well with where we are, with this idea of the coffee cup and the coffee that we get. And I'm just going to read part of it. This is what he calls interbeing. He said basically that everything is a part of everything else. If you are a poet, you will see clearly that there is a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. Without a cloud, there will be no rain. Without rain, the trees will not grow. Without trees, we cannot have paper. The cloud is essential for the paper to exist. If the cloud is not here, the sheet of paper cannot be here either. So we can say that the cloud and the paper have interbeing, or as we would say, they have an interdependent relationship, right? And he said you could even look more deeply until we find out that you could not point at any one thing that is not there in the paper. Time, space, earth, soil, rain, minerals, sunshine, cloud, the river, the heat, everything. Everything coexists with this sheet of paper. And what's really hard is that he says, as thin as this sheet is, everything in the universe is contained within it.
Within the sheet of paper.
Including you or I, because of how we connect with the paper. So it's a completely different way of reframing how we see ourselves in life, our relationship with life and our relationship with one another. If we are indeed the vine, I mean the branches related to the vine, if we are grounded in God's love, then and this prevenient grace, as Wesley would call it, we are grounded in this. We are all grounded in it. We are all interconnected, even as we are physically with the stars. We are interconnected spiritually with this sense of...
that just takes a whole new way of understanding ourselves. Because we raise children to become more independent or to break away from us.
Yeah.
And somehow we lose the concept of, as you're learning to be more independent, you can't forget that there are new kinds of dependencies here, or interdependencies.
Well, I think the danger of declaring independence was great when we were trying to get away from King George and his oppressiveness and his... Wasn't it King George?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And his oppressiveness and the cruelty and all of that, the tyranny. Definitely break away. You're in a bad relationship. Get out. But independence isn't a mode of life. It's a mode of freeing oneself from oppression.
Okay.
You can't live independently. It's unsustainable, ultimately.
Yes.
We have to learn to live together, interdependently. And what's interesting is, for us, when we start doing that, we start seeing God. We put God out there, too. Right? So God's out there, and God becomes utilitarian for us as well.
Oh, absolutely. What can God do for me? Why is God doing this to me?
What can you... I mean, it's the way we see things. You're infringing on my rights.
Yeah.
But the Native Americans have had always this understanding, among other indigenous kinds of people.
Very connected to nature.
Very connected to all of life. In fact, Creator, Spirit, is in everything, even as beyond is mystery, but it is in everything. So you relate to everything as if kin. And it tells a different kind of story.
Yeah.
Everything is connected in a larger story, like we are all pieces of a larger story.
So we need a new story.
Yes.
I mean, maybe not brand new, but we need to be reminded that we, especially we as people of faith, need to be very mindful of this narrative of independence being very short-sighted and not really true to who we understand ourselves to be as Christians.
So I think
It's like an affirmation of faith to say we are interdependent.
Well, I think
we
that's
are
what
all connected.
That's what we were saying about this Sunday, about today.
Affirmation.
Was this today needs to be? I think we could make a habit of it. Today, make a habit.
The
Make a ritual.
Sunday
The Sunday
after?
or the day after 4th of July.
Okay.
July 5th, we declare our interdependence. We reaffirm that we are interdependent upon one another, upon life, upon all things. That's a spiritual revolution that has to take place if we are going to, if the environment is going to sustain, if our relationship with the environment is sustainable. We have to be interdependent with each other. We have to find a way. It's a new story.
A declaration of interdependence.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's, what we're going to say, just a couple of takeaways for how we can do that.
Yeah. How
Because
can we do this?
it's not going to be natural because we operate out of our lower brain. Almost all of us do. We still operate out of fear. We still operate out of
calling me a
anxiety.
reptile.
You're a reptile. We're all lizards. And the sad thing about that is we've got such advanced technology and stuff in the world, but we operate still out of
do
this
it,
place
don't
of we need to have control of things. Our life gets interrupted, and we're completely out of sorts. I get that. We all get that. But at the same time, if we understood that we were interrelated, we would manage all of this so much more productively, I think.
Okay,
So here's
here's
a couple of things we can do.
Okay.
First thing, we need to reclaim the fine art of stillness.
Whew.
Practicing the art of stillness. Meditate, be still, but more than simply praying for something, but being silent enough to hear something. The scripture, be still and know that I am God.
Absolutely.
I mean, how do we tell the fish you're a part of, you live in the water? The fish is too busy, and then too anxious, and then too busy, and then too anxious. And we have to be still to recognize that we are grounded in something larger than ourselves.
The vine.
An intentional stillness.
We're branches.
Look,
All branches.
and we can do that. We can do a couple of things to help reinforce that stillness.
Yeah.
And the interdependency that we have. One is start looking for the interbeing.
So, okay, what's the interbeing?
Start looking for all the interbeing in things that we do every day. Just
All right.
take a look at an object, and the paper, the cup. The ukulele. Said I'd bring it back up. Take a look at the ukulele, and then you start thinking, well, what is involved in that ukulele? You can create sort of like a web diagram.
Okay.
All the different things that went into creating the ukulele, the different stories, the different histories, the narrative, the people. Not even to mention my side of that story, which is how I got involved in it. But
And who gave it to you?
Right.
and
We
the
are
story of
not
that.
islands.
Right.
We are interdependent webs of being.
So we need to be still and know God
Well, be
And-
still and know and just start to begin to listen.
and listen.
Just begin to listen.
And don't waste your time trying to convince the fish that it lives in water.
Right? Don't.
It just does.
I love that. You come out of
It just
listening. and go,
does.
I didn't hear a thing. Well, just keep listening.
Yeah.
But in the process
It's there.
too,
It's
look
there.
for the interbeing.
Yeah.
And it's a
Yeah.
mind-boggling thing.
That's a practice.
The second
isn't
thing
it?
would be gratitude. I think we can begin practicing a gratitude as we begin to notice how these things are all interrelated. Is that second thing.
Yeah.
Now and gratitude can become a daily practice, so you can write both of these things down just to help you kind of keep on top of them.
Okay.
Because you do that. You have a journal. You do that some.
I could be better at keeping up with
I
it.
could be as well. I just started a practice. The other thing I think that we have to do, and this is the challenge, is I think we have to start practicing seeing ourselves in the other and the other in us.
Empathy.
Empathy, but more than simply empathy, it's the literal not just putting myself in their shoes, embodying that person. Imagine that you're that woman who spit on the counter, and you're looking at the clerk, and he's told you, I can't take this because you're not wearing a mask. But there you've been in the whole story, and you put the stuff on the counter, and you've been with your kids for 4 months. And they're driving you crazy, and your husband's there's been all sorts of problems, and then you come in there, and it's just and so you start reacting.
But you're not giving that person an excuse. We're saying, rather than shaming her or utilitarian wise saying, it's bad, get rid of it.
Right.
we say, I mean, for example, to think in terms of her to say, instead of you're a bad person, to say, are you okay?
Yeah. We have to be able to...
Are you there? Are you okay?
Sometimes we have to be the ones to sort of take, I don't want to say take the higher road, but we have to be able to, we put ourselves in someone else's way of seeing in order to see, but also in order to help them see.
Not to excuse.
They are missing something. They are missing that they're part of the same being that we're a part of.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
If we see them as wrong, we're missing it too.
Yeah.
In fact, what did Rumi say? Out beyond the ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there's a field. Let's meet
I'll
there.
meet you there.
Now, how do you get there? Well,
how do you get there?
You have to deconstruct the way we're telling ourselves stories, the way we see ourselves as independent. We have to deconstruct that for each other.
And you know what, Tom, that just doesn't come naturally. I think it takes spiritual practices, is what we would call it.
Be still and
gratitude.
Listen. Look for the interbeing of things as a daily practice. Gratitude as a daily practice. Put yourself in the other person. Not just see yourself as the other person. The I, thou. See them as the sacred being that you see yourself as. And then begin to take it apart and open up.
You know, Joan Chittister, she's a Benedictine nun, said, the point of spirituality, all spirit, is that we have to decide once and for all what we are about, and then live in a way that makes that possible and makes that real. What we are about, what is our, what would you call it, our guiding narrative.
Right. Well, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Dalai Lama, Anne Frank, every one of those people, they faced horrible cruelty, and yet the only way they remained alive was to remain authentic to how they saw the world, which was from this place of interdependence. Yeah. And
they decided once and for all what their life was, what it was connected to being, and we have to remain true to that.
It's really how they kept their soul. So, how they kept their soul alive, kept connected to their soul.
We need to develop our guiding narrative as something about our interdependence on one
it's
another.
a story we need to start telling. And I think the only way we can do that is to start practicing it.
Well, and it won't, I know this about spiritual disciplines. They're never easy. They're never quick. In fact, they're a lifetime journey. They're a lifetime commitment. And the truth is, we're going to fail. Yeah. And we're going to fail again. Do you remember? And we're going to fail again.
The Mr. Miyata Sensei in the Karate Kid, and when I took, and it was wax on, wax off, you know, this mundane kind of practicing. And when I was in Aikido, we would do the same things over and over and over, the same kind of routines, just repeated. And I remember asking him, Sensei, why aren't we advancing? And he says, you have to change how you see people, and the only way to do that is to practice this dance. Practice, because you'll continue to see, you have to stop seeing the other as an enemy. They are a dance partner who's just lost their place in the dance. And if you constantly see them as an enemy, you'll never be able to dance. So you have to see them as a dance partner that just can't see it. That's what we're talking about, is change the narrative, practice new ways of being in that narrative of interdependence.
We can do better.
And we will start to tell that story.
And that's exactly really what John Wesley, that's very related to what John Wesley talked about going on to perfection. That we continue to practice and honing that guiding narrative for our life.
Right.
That we are fully committed to that.
Well, we're going to keep going with this in a series. I mean, we're wrapping. We need to wrap it up now, but we'll have a series that we'll take some more look at some of this. We're going to end with a benediction that I've used before in 1111. Patrick Otuma, and Linda, you're going to read it for us. Let this be our benediction. Pieces.
Our task has ended, so go in pieces. Old ideas upended and now being mended into something new and more true, go in pieces. And as we are unraveling, we are traveling together into a life that is larger than our illusions and confusions, where they and them become us and we, so we can see and feel and freely share our world anew. Go in peace.